I think this patch of grass and dirt pretty much sums up the next 27 minutes. Today for ADG Pro, we're taking another look back at Excelsior Phase I Lysandia, because this game offers a unique opportunity to do something in a DOS game which wasn't really common outside of the most hardcore of role-playing experiences. The ability to kill just about anyone and everything in the game world. So, following in the footsteps of Undertale's quote-unquote genocide route, let's answer the question. How many innocent NPCs can we cut down in Excelsior and still beat the game? Or more pertinently, does Excelsior even have contingencies in place for detecting this kind of behavior? But before we can even begin to tackle this question, we need to create our character. Now, normally I go by the screen name Gemini, but whenever I'm playing a character in a game contrary to how I would normally act, I inverse that name to Inimeg. Also, because magic can be exceptionally powerful this game, I want to make sure I'm playing one of the more magically inclined classes. But there's a tiny little catch here, since 2 of the 3 classes which get magic bonuses also happen to be more pious than the other classes, and will not allow you to assign their alignment too close to pure evil. So we're pretty much stuck playing as a mage. Now, I was originally going to make them a troll as well, until I realized that trolls have the worst starting charm rating, which would make building the character up a chore. So instead, went with a half-orc and then shot their charm rating through the roof so that I could take advantage of the buying and selling glitch associated with having too high of a charm stat. Then I began the process of getting my character prepared for what was to come. Now, since the goal here is to beat the game, this not only meant leveling up my character to the maximum experience level, level 10, but it also meant acquiring all 12 skills. Though as a mage, I was able to start with 4 of them by default: Scribe, Magic, and 2 more of my choosing, with my choices being Bandage, because healing in this game sucks without that skill, and Music, because that's the most convoluted skill to acquire, and I didn't want to have to go through that whole process, even though the skill itself is practically useless. Now, theoretically, you could probably perform a genocide route through this game with just about any character class, but one curious problem you may run into is that some NPCs are behind countertops, meaning you must use a ranged attack or magic to hit them. But for most classes, this shouldn't be a problem, because you can use bows and crossbows. But one consideration is that one particular class, the Swordsman, has almost no options for ranged attacks over the course of the entire game, short of learning magic, with a single exception. If a swordsman learns the marksmanship skill, there is one bow in the game that they'll be able to wield, known as the marksman's bow, which can be found for sale in the village of Randaway on the large island in the southeast section of the world. In any event, I went about doing typical start of the game stuff, running around and powering myself up as much as I could, buying spells, abusing the charm trick to get tons of money, acquiring the 3 amulets, finding the lightning one since I'm running with a mage, and also making sure to pick up the Devil's Fury spell from Dungeon Davenhoven, which is the strongest black art spell in the game, and is best suited to the alignment of pure evil, which I gave Inimeg here. After spending a solid amount of time unleashing my fury against random encounters surrounding Castle Excelsior, and getting my character up to level 10, it was finally time to start the genocide route proper. But before we get too deep into this, it may be a good idea to test the waters and see if the game has any special considerations in place or not for the kind of vile behavior that we're about to embark on. The simplest test would be right at the start of the game in the city of Oublier, as there's a prized duck swimming around in the middle of the city, and a particular townswoman who that duck belongs to. Now, when you normally speak to her, she gushes on about her duck. But if you then go and kill the duck and talk to her again, she gushes on about her duck as though it's still alive and swimming in the pool. Well, as another test, I tried decimating the entire population of Castle Excelsior to see what the king might think of this. Even though, spoiler, he's not really the king, thus part of the reason why you're not able to actually hurt him. But despite that mini massacre, when I go back to the king, he just continues contemplating the tax situation. So I think it's pretty safe to assume the game has no considerations for killing NPCs, but Actually, no. One more test so we can be as definitive about this as possible. If we head to Dungeon in Tungo and meet up with the Resistance, their leader Sebastian ultimately poses a question to us if we really wish to join their cause or not. If we say no, all that happens is he gets disappointed and hopes that we'll come back later with a change of heart. So all we've done is just pause normal progression. If we then decide to just murder Sebastian then and there, no one down here seems to give a damn. Well, yeah, the game definitely does not have any contingencies in place for killing NPCs, which were never meant to die, which means our genocide route is more so going to be about the execution rather than the outcome, and oh, that was a pun. Which means our genocide route is more so going to be about the process rather than the outcome. And we'll certainly be keeping tabs to make sure we cut down every last NPC in this world that we can find. However, before we can truly annihilate everyone, we're actually going to beat the game normally first, just so we know exactly what to expect and can take note of any particular events which may throw a monkey wrench into the proceedings. In fact, many aspects of the game are dependent on talking to particular NPCs in a particular order, and this includes all aspects of the main quest. Thus, beating the game will be pretty much impossible unless we leave everyone alive until the last minute. A normal run through the game, once you begin the main quest by joining the Resistance, first has you enter into the Royal Keep to find Prince Williamson, being held at the top along with many other political prisoners who spoke out against the king following his change of heart. The thing to note here is that the guards in the actual prison area are not hostile when you first arrive, but do become hostile the moment you tell them to incarcerate you. Now that said, it's impossible to actually access the prince unless you're taken prisoner, so one way or another, those guards are turning hostile as part of the main story. Next, we're sent off to find an old tome known as Varbel's Almanac in order to discover a recipe to an elixir which grants near immortality, and then to have a chemist make that potion. The funny thing here is that most aspects of this quest are entirely optional. You don't have to find the almanac, you don't have to get it repaired, you don't have to read it, and you don't have to decode it. All that matters is getting the elixir made, which means if you know what the ingredients are, that's good enough, though you won't be able to get an appropriate glass container made without first speaking with a chemist about the ingredients found in the elixir. When all is said and done, all you need to complete this leg of the main quest is to get the elixir, even though the elixir itself is technically optional in the final battle, seeing as all it does is temporarily raise your current and maximum HP to 999. Next, we're tasked to acquire a crystal jar and an artifact known as the Gem of Severance. The funny thing about these two quests is they go hand in hand pretty well in terms of locations on the map, so it's best to try doing them at the same time as opposed to one at a time. Ultimately, the crystal jar is found inside a magical fire found in the northeasternmost corner of the world, but since magic doesn't work inside that pocket of the void, we must seek the help of an inventor instead by the name of Karth Whitlaw, who loans out a mechanical bird, but this bird must be wound with an incredibly small and delicate key, which is only possible to make out of aramel, a brilliant green metal mined out from under Keep Flare. But upon reaching the upper sections of the keep, you find a group of elves magically enslaved to mine the stuff thanks to their tormentor Medrabempo, a sorceress who resides even higher up in the keep. Now, the interesting thing here is that Medrabempo doesn't technically start out as a hostile entity, and will have different dialogue depending on if you make conversation with the elves or not prior to meeting her. But regardless, she needs to die if you want to get your hands on any aramel. So this is the first instance of a required kill to progress the plot. And once the evil sorceress is dead, you're able to help yourself to all of the aramel you could ever want. But realistically, one pile is sufficient. You can then get the key made, wind up the bird to fetch the jar from inside the magic fire, and upon returning the bird to Karth, he gives us one of the most useless tips imaginable, since it's only useful if you somehow got this far into the game without the magic lantern or green amulet, a feat which itself would be pretty freaking impressive. As for the Gem of Severance, this is one of the more unusual quests in the game, since crafting the gem requires 2 eye stones, one made from the willing sacrifice of someone of pure goodness, and another made from the willing sacrifice of someone of pure evil. Yeah, one of the things that's hard to cope with in terms of the logic of the story in this game is that good and evil are simply opposing ideals, and that the real enemy is chaos. I'm not going to get into a philosophical debate about how stupid that is, so instead, we're just going to play along with the logic so we can get things done. To get the Eye Stone of Pure Goodness, the person we need to sacrifice found in the Royal Keep, who is also holding on to the Divine Hailstorm spell for those following a fully good alignment, requires us to get a particular ceremonial dagger blessed. But the person who's able to bless the dagger requires that we become a member of the Order of the Circle, which we can become by finding the last surviving leader of the Order up in the 7th Keep and giving her half of our food. Once that's all done and the dagger is blessed, we go back to the Royal Keep, sacrifice the person there, and acquire the Eye Stone. Our required death toll for the main quest is now up to 2. To get the Eye Stone of Pure Evil, we're actually going all the way back to where we found the Devil's Fury spell back in Dungeon Davenhoven, as the person there, despite being pure evil, is willing to be a sacrifice under one condition. We need to go back to the person who made us a member of the Order of the Circle and murder her in cold blood. Yes, this is part of the main quest. You must do this to beat the game. And more pertinently, since the emblem of the Order will disappear from us following this heinous act, it's imperative that you get the good Eye Stone first. Otherwise, you may never. In any event, once the last remaining leader of the Order of the Circle is dead, we head back to Davenhoven, slay the evil man there, and receive the evil Eye Stone. Our required kill count is now up to 4. The final thing to do is to fuse the 2 Eye Stones into the Gem of Severance, which can only be done at Dungeon Draxon. Now, something to point out is that Dungeon Draxon is the second worst dungeon in the game. It is essentially a giant maze of rivers, lakes, and disease-riddled plants. I don't think it's actually possible to survive the trip through this dungeon without at least some magic, since you can only carry so many items with you, and it's a long trek to get to the spot where the fusion can take place. Not to mention, without a quick cast of the Hasty Exit spell, you'd have to go all the way back the way you came. This leads to the final quest of the game, acquiring the Banishment Sword, the only weapon which is able to bring harm to beings of chaos. The start of this quest is also what finally makes available access to Keep Ironthread, but you need to know the password to get in. Normally, to get the password, you have to go through a couple side quests for the other royals at Castle Griswold and Castle Infinitum. But so long as you know the password ahead of time, I do not believe you need to perform those quests. Now, once in Keep Ironthread, though, you're going to rapidly discover that it is the worst dungeon in the game by far. Not only does the magic lantern not work in it, but it's effectively just one giant multi-floor maze where a handful of the ladders do not link back to the ladders they came from. At least, not in the original DOS version of the game that I'm playing. I've been told the ladders should all link together appropriately, so that could just be a bug with the original 1.0 release of the game. Still, after mapping the place out as best as I could, I found an incredibly easy path to get up to where the Banishment Sword is resting. Upon entering the keep, head north at the first intersection, then take the ladder, head west at the next 2 intersections, then take the ladder, head east at the next intersection, and take the ladder, head north at the next 2 intersections, and take the ladder, then for the next 5 intersections, go west 3 times, then north, then west again, then take the ladder, go south at the next intersection and take the ladder, go north at the next intersection, and then take every ladder following to reach the final chamber. Yeah, that might be a little tricky to follow his voice, that's why I've got the actual progression key listed on screen. Also, make sure you bring a regular clock with you to solve the final puzzle, not a mystic timepiece. I can't even begin to count the number of times I've made that mistake. Then, once the Banishment Sword is acquired, you're ready to end the game. Just head up to King Valkyrie and Castle Excelsior, pull out the Gem of Severance to split the king into his former self and his self of pure chaos, shatter the chaotic form of the king using the sword in order to reveal the true chaos within, then pull out the jar to seal the chaos away for all eternity. As one final test, I made some efforts to alter how this battle might go, but nothing I did really amounted to much of anything. Not even placing a horse down where the entrance seals when the battle begins, as the game just erased my horse and sealed the entrance all the same. So, now that we know what's involved with beating the game properly, we can see that really, there's not a lot of death going on through a normal run, apart from random encounters and the guards in the Royal Keep. Like, not counting King Valkyrie, since we're splitting off and sealing away the chaos which took command of him, only 4 individuals had to die for the main quest to be completed. And everyone else in the world not only stays alive, but they stay present. No one simply disappears as a result of completing or progressing through any of the main or side quests. Plus, so long as we proceed through the main quest, we will unlock access to everyone in the world and retain that access all the way up to the end. Thus, the best way to perform a genocide route through this game is to get one step away from saving the day and then begin the massacre. Now, before we move on, I do want to quickly point out again that this is a video game with no ties to reality. Real genocide is about as heinous an act as is humanly possible, so don't ever joke about it. Since this is a game though, and no one is actually being harmed by what we're about to do, let's get this murder spree started. To help ensure we leave no NPC left unslaughtered, we're going to enlist the help of this handy little map I once made of the game world, with all 35 locations marked which we're able to enter. Now, of those 35 locations, we can already omit 3 of them right off the bat, since they don't have any friendly NPCs at all. Dungeon Draxon, Keep Ironthread, and the Magic Fire up in the northeast corner. Also, there's one other thing I should point out: we can't kill the horses. Yeah, I think the reasoning here is that because the horse object itself in the game can be boarded and left just like a ship, and because the game doesn't want the player to lose their horse after purchasing it, the game just doesn't allow horses to ever take damage from anything. Essentially, when we're done with what's to come, this is going to become an equestrian world more than anything else. So, let's perform this rampage in alphabetical order by name, leaving out the 3 castles until the very end. This means the first location we're visiting is the city of Bebel, which has 6 guards present and 20 innocent townfolk, all of whom succumb to our spells. Though it's important to point out that spells which affect all enemies on screen do not hurt friendly NPCs unless they've been turned hostile, a fact which is going to come back to haunt us before too long. Also, if you successfully deal damage to anyone or anything while on a particular map, any non-hostile guards on that map will become hostile. Thus part of the reason why I'm separating out guard kills from NPC kills, just in case that matters to anyone. Next up is the city of Berinthia, which has the exact same setup, 6 guards and 20 townsfolk. Next up is the village of Burrows, which has 6 guards, 18 townsfolk, and 1 duck. Now, since the game does differentiate between regular harmless ducks and crazed ducks, which attack at will, I will be adding the non-lethal ducks to the kill count. Next is Dungeon Davenhoven, which has 2 people to kill, Alexis the Glassblower on the 3rd floor, and the evil wizard Fevez at the bottom, who must be killed one way or another, though if you don't properly kill him as part of the main quest, you will not get the Eye Stone from him. Next up is the village of Imbuscule, which has 6 guards yet only 15 townsfolk, making it the most imbalanced ratio of guards to people out of all the locations in the game, if we don't count the castles. Next up is the port city of Farborough, which takes some effort to get around, but ultimately has 6 guards, 16 townsfolk, and 3 ducks to take down. Next up is Keep Flare, with 9 helpless elves on the 3rd floor, and the wizard Medrabempo up on the top floor, whom we must take out first so we can get access to the Aramal we need before we take out the elves. Next up are the Forgotten Pits, which only has a single person to find, down on the 3rd floor, the priest who blesses the sacrificial dagger we need as part of the main quest. Next up is the monster city of Grethel, which is a bit unusual since it doesn't have any guards at all, instead giving us 5 townsfolk and 14 friendly monsters to cut down. Again, listing them separately, but still adding them to the overall count since these monsters do not start out hostile and only become hostile when directly attacked, especially considering this is the only instance of this happening in the game. Next up is the island village of Haze, with 6 guards and 21 townsfolk to decimate. Following that, we have the village of Hollow, with 6 guards and 19 townsfolk present. Which, yes, you might be seeing a bit of a pattern by this point that most friendly locations have 6 guards, but I assure you this does differ in some places. Next up, we have the hut of Hoat the Woodcutter, which he inhabits entirely on his own. Next up, we have Dungeon in Tungo, home of the Resistance, which you'd think they would put some effort into guarding, but alas, there are no real guards down there, instead providing us with a total of 34 townsfolk and 4 ducks to slaughter. 15 townsfolk on the 3rd floor, with the remaining 19 in the ducks on the bottom floor. Next up is the hut of Jad Merlins, which... So, Jad Merlings is the character who will teach you the music skill, and even has some special dialogue if you meet him while starting the game with the music skill. But the trick is that you basically have to go on a wild goose chase trying to find him, traveling between multiple towns and speaking with specific people in those towns before finally being told that he's headed home, and it's only at that moment that he'll appear in his hut near the village of Randaway on the southeastern island. So yeah, if you want to murder Jad, you gotta get him to show up first. Even in a genocide route, this man keeps finding ways to be annoying. Next up is the hut of the inventor Karth Whitlaw, which he inhabits alone. Next, we have the city of North Blagsell, which has 6 guards and 18 townsfolk, except well, this is awkward. There's a townswoman at the very top, secluded away behind a door in a private room, which we absolutely cannot get access to. And trust me, I searched the entire perimeter of the city, every wall which could offer a gateway to the other side and possibly give us access, and nope, no such luck. We can't use non-directional spells either, because such spells only work on hostile targets, meaning despite our bloodlust, we have our first example of a survivor who will be left alive to repopulate the world once our carnage is concluded. Next up is the city of Oublier, which has 6 guards, 17 townsfolk, and 1 duck. Next up is the village of Owenfield, which has 6 guards, 16 townsfolk, another of which is securely hidden from our scornful gaze and will thus survive the slaughter, as well as 4 chickens. What's interesting about the chickens is that despite being properly realized entities in the game, which can take damage and everything, it's not actually possible to directly interact with any of them, as the only chickens found anywhere in the game are behind fences. And this doesn't mean we can't kill them, it just means we must do so with ranged attacks, and we will also never know just how strong their own attacks would be if they could get close enough to peck our faces off. Next up is the village of Pibsley, with only 5 guards, not 6, and 20 townsfolk. Next up is the island village of Randaway, with only 5 guards again, yet 26 townsfolk for them to try and keep safe, along with 4 ducks. Next we have the village of Raldia, with 6 guards and 23 townsfolk. Next we have the Royal Keep, where the 3rd floor is home to the friar who must be sacrificed to obtain the Eye Stone of Goodness, while the 4th floor is where the Royal Prison is, where we have a total of 9 guards to take down who are guaranteed to become hostile as part of the main quest, along with 12 prisoners, 8 of whom are townsfolk, the other 4 of whom are monsters. Next we have the 7th Keep, which has 2 people living within. On the 2nd floor is Hugh Winwell Crumb, the chemist who mixes up the elixir we need as part of the main quest, and at the top is Lady Jasmine, the leader of the Order of the Crescent, who must die as part of the main quest, but killing her too early will brick any run through this game. Next up is the city of South Blagsell, which has 6 guards and 21 townsfolk to slay. Next is the city of Stockshire, which has 6 guards, 26 townsfolk, and 1 duck. But once again, one of the townsfolk is impossible to reach, thus our count for people evading our wrath is now up to 3. Next up is the Hut of Thieves, found on an island in the southwestern section of the world. Well, at first glance, this hut has 9 thieves present, but if you look around, you'll notice there's a 10th thief hiding up in the northeast away from the hut, whom is easy to miss, so make sure you don't. Next up is the village of Whittlenix, which has only 4 guards present, along with 18 townsfolk and 9 chickens. But alas, we again have an instance of one of the townsfolk smartly hiding away from the reach of our magic, thus the survival count is now up to 4. Then finally, before we get to the castles, we have the last 2 villages of Woodshade and Wickmire. Woodshade has 6 guards and 18 townsfolk, while Wickmire has 6 guards and 16 townsfolk. In terms of the castles, Castle Griswold has 5 guards, the king, and only 5 other townsfolk, while Castle Infinitum has only 4 guards, the king, 11 townsfolk, and a single duck. But then finally, we have Castle Excelsior, our last stop on our gruesome murder quest, with 9 guards to take down and 15 townsfolk. It's important to note here that in terms of the battle with the king, we technically split the king into 2 beings, neither of which die. The chaotic king is forced to drop its facade and is then sealed for eternity into a crystal jar, while the lawful king praises us, despite the massacre we just engaged in, and we are whisked away and congratulated by the fixers before we even have a chance to stab the good king with our weapons. Though if you do attempt it during the final battle, it doesn't work anyways, thus King Valkyrie, ironically, ends up being our 5th and final survivor. Thus, the total kill count of a Genocide Route through Excelsior Phase I Lysandia turns out to be 131 guards, 453 townsfolk, 18 friendly monsters, 15 ducks, and 13 chickens, with the final survivors being King Valkyrie, 4 townsfolk, and all of the horses. Lysandia is going to be a very awkward place to live for the next few centuries, given the way we've left things. Anywho, I think we're done here. As much as I hope the game had story contingencies in place to deal with going on a rampage, I'm also not surprised that it doesn't. One of the great difficulties of developing a game world and story with an extreme level of freedom, be it a video game or even a tabletop game like Dungeons & Dragons, is that there are so many variations in how things can play out that it can be mind-boggling trying to account for all of them. This is a big part of what made Undertale so impressive when it originally debuted, since it wasn't just scanning the state of the game world, it was scanning the state of your deaths, attempts to quit, saves made, and your restarts, and acting on that information as well. The point, though, is that it's always intriguing to me when a game reacts to a player's attempts to play it in an unintended way, as I get a kick out of developers spotting those loopholes and accounting for them. Alas, Excelsior Phase I Lysandia is not one of those games, but it's still kinda crazy just how much carnage it let me get away with. So that'll be all for today's ADG Pro video. Normally we do a filler video next, but given that there's only 3 regular episodes left for Season 7, let's make a dash through them. Thus, next up, 2 Saturdays from now, on September 27th, will be a standard review, episode 348, where we're going to be taking a look at a fairly non-violent game made by a programming duo who normally did not shy away from graphic violence. And no, I'm not talking about the Bloodlust software guys. I mean, we just covered Time Slaughter. Nah, this is going to be something which may seem entirely out of left field unless you're familiar with DOS gaming in the early 90s. So make sure you stay tuned to see what kind of game this could possibly be. Thanks for watching, everyone, and extra special thanks to everyone supporting me over on Patreon. If you'd also like to support the show directly and get some extra perks, then head on over to patreon.com/KASICK.